Hello friends, in the last section we discussed different types of hormones, the nature of these hormones, classification of hormones, and briefly we discussed the mechanism of action of different hormones, okay, the receptors associated with different hormones. Now we are going to start individual glands and we'll try to cover in detail the different hormones produced by these glands and important diseases associated with them. So let us start with one of the most important glands called as anterior pituitary gland. So the first important point about anterior pituitary gland that we should know is that it's called as the master gland of the body. It's called as the master gland of the body. Now, the reason it's called as a master gland is because other glands of the body they are directly or indirectly controlled by this anterior pituitary gland. Okay, so as the name says anterior pituitary, it clearly means that there must be a posterior pituitary as well. So there are different parts of pituitary gland, anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary, but development wise they are different. Okay, if we see anterior pituitary, it develops from Rathke's pouch. It develops from Rathke's pouch, and posterior pituitary, it develops from the floor of third ventricle as an undergrowth of floor of third ventricle. Okay, Rathke's pouch and posterior develops from the floor of third ventricle. So let me show you a diagram in order to have better understanding. So this is the diagram of the pituitary gland. This part, this is called as the stalk of the pituitary gland. So this is the infundibular stem called as stalk of the pituitary gland. This part is the stalk of pituitary gland, and below here, this is the anterior lobe of pituitary gland, and this is the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. Okay, so these are different parts of pituitary gland. Now pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus. Okay, first pituitary gland was called as the master gland of the body. In fact, it is called as master gland of the body, but it was found out that this pituitary gland itself is actually controlled by another part of brain called as hypothalamus. It means hypothalamus produces certain factors or certain hormones which control the function of the pituitary gland, and then pituitary gland controls function of other parts of the body. So here this stalk it plays an important role in connecting this pituitary gland to the hypothalamus. Okay, so we have stalk, it connects pituitary to hypothalamus. Okay, it's not just stalk that connects pituitary to the hypothalamus. There are different connections between pituitary and the hypothalamus, and each of these connections they have different roles to play in secretion of various hormones. Okay, so let us try to understand these connections. So if this is hypothalamus, okay, this is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus produces different factors which control the function of the pituitary. Okay, so let us try to understand how hypothalamus plays role in the secretions of the anterior pituitary. As we all know, anterior pituitary produces six hormones. These are growth hormone, okay, prolactin, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, ACTH, and thyroid stimulating hormone. These are six hormones produced by anterior pituitary: growth hormone, prolactin, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, ACTH, and thyroid stimulating hormone. Posterior pituitary, it releases hormones like vasopressin, or we call as ADH, and oxytocin. Okay. Now hypothalamus, there are different connections between hypothalamus and the pituitary. First, and one of the most important connection is called as the hypothalamo. Okay, I'm going to write it here. It's called as the hypothalamo hypophyseal portal system. So it's a portal system between hypothalamus and hypophysis. Pituitary gland is also called as hypophysis. So it connects hypothalamus and hypophysis. That's anterior pituitary. And through this system, hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system, different hormones are produced that actually control secretions of these hormones of the anterior pituitary. So growth hormone secretion is increased by growth hormone releasing hormone, which is produced by hypothalamus. Similarly, follicle stimulating hormone secretion is controlled by gonadotrophin releasing hormone, because both these hormones together are called gonadotrophins. Similarly, ACTH secretion is controlled by adrenocorticotropic releasing hormone or corticotropic releasing hormone, and thyroid stimulating hormone is controlled by thyrotropin releasing hormone. So these hormones are produced by hypothalamus and they go into the anterior pituitary through hypothalamohypophyseal portal system. So these hormones they actually go through hypophyseal portal system. These hormones they reach the anterior pituitary through hypothalamohypophyseal portal system, and from the anterior pituitary these hormones are released into the blood. Okay. Now, there is another connection between hypothalamus and anterior pituitary, but it controls the release of this hormone called as prolactin. So, this is called as the tubuloinfundibular pathway. Okay, I'm going to write it here. This is called as tubuloinfundibular pathway. Tubuloinfundibular pathway, and through this pathway prolactin inhibitory factor is released, which is chemically dopamine. Okay, so dopamine is released and this inhibits the release of prolactin from the anterior pituitary. So important point is that prolactin is under the inhibitory control from hypothalamus, whereas all other hormones they are under stimulatory control from the hypothalamus. Okay, this type of relationship between hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary is called as hypothalamotropic relationship. Hypothalamotropic relationship. In other words, it's a tropic relationship. Tropic means a positive relationship. Okay, except prolactin, which is under inhibitory control of hypothalamus. Now, in the hypothalamus, so first pathway is hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. Second one is the tubulo-infundibular pathway, and the third is the stalk itself. Okay, so the neurons present in the stalk they also connect hypothalamus directly to the posterior pituitary. So the neurons in the hypothalamus, especially in the supraoptic nucleus and paraventricular nucleus. So these are two important nucleus, supraoptic nucleus and paraventricular nucleus. These produce these hormones called as vasopressin and oxytocin, and through the axons these hormones are going to reach to the posterior pituitary, and they are stored in the posterior pituitary. They are stored in posterior pituitary and they are released when appropriate stimuli is present. Okay, so this is the third pathway, that's through the neurons, and this relationship is called as neurohypophyseal relationship. Neurohypophyseal relationship. So these are different pathways. Now it's easy to understand from this diagram if okay all these connections they actually go through the stalk. Okay, so if this is the pituitary gland and here it's hypothalamus, so all these connections they go through the stalk of the pituitary gland. So if due to some reason there is problem at the level of stalk or there is compression at the level of stalk, let us say here this connection is cut, we can easily understand there will be decreased production of growth hormone, decreased production of follicle stimulating hormone, ACTH, thyrotropin, thyroid stimulating hormone. But this prolactin, since it is under inhibitory control, there will always be increased production of prolactin. Okay. Now, this happens in a particular case, which is called as the Stark effect. Stark effect. Stark effect means that if there is a tumor in the pituitary, so let me use this diagram again. Let us say a tumor is present in the pituitary and this tumor has grown large and large to such an extent that now it starts compressing this stalk. Okay, so it compresses the stalk and as a result it blocks the stalk. So here The stalk is blocked. Now, no factor can come from this and reach into the anterior or posterior pituitary. This is called as Stalk effect. And what is the result of Stalk effect? There will be decreased production of growth hormone. There will be decreased production of follicle stimulating hormone, decreased production of luteinizing hormone. There will be decrease in production of thyroid stimulating hormone, and there is going to be increase in production of prolactin. And the reason why there is increased production of prolactin is because of this. Okay, so this is called as Stark effect. Okay, we'll study this Stark effect again once we reach the acromegaly part. Okay, so for now just remember this much. Okay, and remember these names: supraoptic nucleus and paraventricular nucleus of hypothalamus. They produce vasopressin and they are stored in the posterior pituitary. Along with vasopressin, some other molecules are released. Two other molecules are released. These are called as neurohypophysin. Neurohypophysin. Neurohypophysin is also produced, but the function of this molecule is not known. Now, if we talk about the anterior pituitary gland, it produces different types of hormones. At a microscopic level, if we see this anterior pituitary gland, there are different cells which produce different types of hormones. It means anterior pituitary produces growth hormone, anterior pituitary also produces ACTH. But at a microscopic level, these are two different cells in the anterior pituitary. One of the cell produces growth hormone and other cell produces ACTH. So let us try to discuss these cells. First, there is somatotrop. Somatotrop produces growth hormone. And then we have another cell, lactotrop. Lactotrop produces prolactin. Gonadotrop, it produces follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Corticotrop produces adrenocorticotropic hormone, and thyrotrop produces thyroid stimulating hormone. So these are different types of cells present in the anterior pituitary. Okay, here we are going to mainly discuss the anterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary we'll discuss in a different section. Somatotrops, lactotrops, gonadotrops, corticotrops, thyrotrops. Okay, now this, try to remember them in this sequence only, because somatotrops, they they constitute almost 50% of the cells in the anterior pituitary. Lactotrops, they constitute almost 30 to 50%, and gonadotrops almost 20%, and rest are in small numbers, as you can see. Okay, so that means the maximum number of cells in the anterior pituitary, they are somatotrophs, followed by lactotrophs, followed by gonadotrophs, somatotrophs, followed by lactotrophs, followed by gonadotrophs. Now this sequence is important. Why? Because whenever there is a case of hypopituitarism, hypopituitarism, it means that pituitary gland is not functioning. It may be due to congenital reasons or other reasons. So which hormones will be maximum affected? So there will be maximum growth hormone will be affected to the maximum extent, followed by, okay, lactotrophs produce prolactin, followed by prolactin, and followed by FSH and LH. Okay. Now, this thyrotrops, they produce thyrotropin releasing hormone, but hypothyroidism is not seen. Hypothyroidism, it's not a component of hypopituitarism. This is because even without TSH, T3 and T4 can be produced. T3 and T4 can be produced even without TSH. So it's not a component of hypopituitarism. So these are different types of cells: somatotrophs, lactotrophs, gonadotrophs, corticotrophs, thyrotrophs. Another important point, why always I write growth hormone and prolactin together. Always write growth hormone and prolactin together. Okay, you can see here as well, growth hormone and prolactin are together. The reason is because these two cells, when the pituitary is stained, they appear as acidophilic. These are acidophilic cells, whereas all other cells, they are basophilic. They are basophilic. There are some other similarities as well between growth hormone and prolactin. First, they are produced by these cells. Both are acidophilic and they both act by the same mechanism, that's JAK-STAT tyrosine kinase pathway. JAK-STAT tyrosine kinase pathway. So, because of this reason, these two hormones, they are given a fancy name. They are called as twin hormones. These are called as twin hormones. Okay, they are called as twin hormones. So that's about different types of cells. Okay, now let us try to discuss growth hormone in detail. So what's growth hormone? First of all, which cells of the pituitary produce growth hormone? So as you can see, somatotropes, these are acidophilic cells, they produce growth hormone. So growth hormone is produced by somatotropes. And what type of cells are they? They are acidophilic cells, and they constitute almost 50% of cells in the pituitary. Okay. Another important point that I forgot to mention here is that these corticotropes, they are earliest cells formed during development. During development. Okay, earliest cells are the corticotropes. Growth hormone is produced by somatotropes. So, what is the mechanism of action? We already discussed it in the last section. Just remember the pathway. They act through JAK, STAT pathway. So, the receptors for growth hormone, they are JAK, STAT receptors. Again, once it binds, so there is dimerization of receptors, then there will be activation of intracellular domain, which will cause phosphorylation of this Janus kinase, then it will cause phosphorylation of STAT proteins, then other proteins in the cytoplasm, second messengers, they'll go to the nucleus, and in the nucleus, they'll produce the desired effect. We already discussed this. Now, another important one, what is the physiological stimuli for the release of growth hormone? Okay, one of the stimulus, we already saw this here. Okay, that's the growth hormone releasing hormone produced by hypothalamus. It causes release of growth hormone. So one of the stimuli, physiological stimuli, is growth hormone releasing hormone from hypothalamus. Okay. Another important stimuli, physiological stimuli, is called as ghrelin, and it's produced by GIT. It also causes increasing production of growth hormone. What are the physiological inhibitors? Now, in physiological inhibitor, we have one physiological inhibitor called as somatostatin. Somatostatin. In the last section, again, we saw the receptors for somatostatin are inhibitory type of G protein coupled receptors, so they will decrease the production of growth hormone. They also decrease the production of uh, insulin, glucagon, because this somatostatin is also produced by delta cells in the pancreas, so it will decrease the secretion of insulin, glucagon from alpha beta cells, and it will also decrease GI secretions, other than decreasing the production of growth hormone. Okay, so this is the physiological. These are the physiological inhibitors. Okay, somatostatin. Now, what? Okay, these function physiologically. What are other stimulating factors that cause increased growth hormone production or decreased growth hormone production? So first, let us see increased growth hormone production. Practically any factor that can produce hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia. That means any factor that causes hypoglycemia that will increase growth hormone production. It's going to increase growth hormone secretion. So hypoglycemia can be actually caused by fasting. It can be caused by fasting uh, and other things that you can think of. Fasting causes hypoglycemia, and hypoglycemia is a trigger for the release of growth hormone. Inhibitory factors. In the inhibitory factors, we have hypocaloric state. Hypocaloric states. For example, malnutrition. In case of malnutrition, there will be decreased production of growth hormone. Similarly, another case, that's aging. As the person ages, there is decreased production of growth hormone. So two things that you need to remember here: hypocaloric state and aging. They decrease the production of growth hormone. Okay, so this is some basic about growth hormone. Now let's go to actions of the growth hormone. So, okay, actions of growth hormone. First, let us try to understand an important point here. Growth hormone, it can cause actions directly by acting on growth hormone receptors, or it can act on the liver through growth hormone receptors again, and in response to this, liver produces insulin-like growth factor 1, which is also called as somatomedin C. Now, the rest actions of growth hormone are actually performed by insulin-like growth factor 1. So, these are the direct actions, and these actions which are produced by insulin-like growth factor 1, somatomedin C, these are the indirect actions of growth hormone. Okay. Now, an important question that we should remember is growth hormone and insulin like growth factor 1, they some actions, both of them produce similar actions, and in some cases they produce different actions. If we go to basics, there are four actions of growth hormone. That's first, there will be protein synthesis. Second, there will be, it will cause growth of long bones, so there will be epiphyseal growth. Point number three, there's going to be what's its effect on lipolysis. And point number four, the effect on glucose levels in the blood. Okay. Now, the first two actions, that's protein synthesis and epiphyseal growth, both are going to produce same action. That means growth hormone and insulin like growth factor 1, they increase protein synthesis and they increase the epiphyseal growth. But in case of lipolysis and in maintaining glucose levels, they have different actions. Okay. So if we talk about lipolysis, growth hormone, it increases lipolysis. And insulin like growth factor 1, all the actions of this are just like insulin, so it inhibits lipolysis. And if we talk about glucose levels, growth hormone is diabetogenic. That means it increases growth hormone levels, whereas insulin like growth factor 1 is non-diabetogenic. Non-diabetogenic or anti-diabetogenic, it decreases the levels of glucose. Okay, so these are direct actions which are directly mediated by growth hormone, and the actions mediated by insulin like growth factor 1, they are indirect actions. Now let us try to discuss these under different headings. First, there is protein metabolism. So what will be the action on protein metabolism? Like I said, both growth hormone and insulin like growth factor 1, they increase sorry they cause protein synthesis. They increase protein synthesis. So that means they decrease protein metabolism. So there will be more protein synthesis. And again, here there will be more synthesis of proteins. Whenever there is more synthesis of proteins in the body, that results in what's called as negative nitrogen balance. So both growth hormone and insulin like growth factor, they cause negative nitrogen balance by increasing protein synthesis. Increase in protein synthesis is the main action here. Now another action on epiphyseal growth. What about epiphyseal growth? Growth hormone, it causes growth of long bones by promoting epiphyseal growth before puberty, at the time of puberty, before these epiphyseal growth plates actually close. And this action is same for growth hormone as well as insulin like growth factor, both do the same actions. Now, if we talk about another function, that's another action, lipolysis. Okay. Now, growth hormone, it increases lipolysis, whereas insulin like growth factor inhibits lipolysis. Now, the main question is which action is good, which effect is good? Actually, increase in lipolysis, this effect is not a good effect at all. Why? Because whenever there will be increase in lipolysis, it's going to increase free fatty acids. And whenever free fatty acids increase, these free fatty acids, they go into the cytosol. Now they cannot enter into the mitochondria because uh, palmitoyl transferase is not normally expressed on mitochondria to prevent formation of ketone bodies. So in the cytosol, they will be converted into fatty acyl coenzyme A. And this fatty acyl coenzyme A, it plays an important role. It has a key role in causing insulin resistance. So It's not a good effect at all because it promotes insulin resistance, whereas insulin-like growth factor it inhibits lipolysis, which is relatively a good effect. And diabetogen, I already discussed this. Growth hormone it increases glucose levels, hyperglycemic, whereas insulin-like growth factor decreases glucose levels. Okay, so these are different actions of growth hormone. And other than this, there's one more action that's it causes retention of sodium, which also causes retention of water. So there will be manifestation like hypertension when there is more growth hormone. Okay, so these are the main actions of growth hormone. Now, this insulin like growth factor, I already mentioned this part. Basically, growth hormone, once it acts on the liver, it acts on growth hormone receptors, and in response, the liver produces insulin like growth factor 1, which is called as somatomedin C. Now, the structure of insulin like growth factor 1 is similar to insulin, and functions are also similar to insulin. And the receptor for insulin like growth factor 1 receptor, is also similar to insulin receptor. So actions are pretty much same. Another important point that we should know, if a person is born with a congenital deficiency of growth hormone, the height or length of the baby is going to be same, or what we call as normal. It is because in the intrauterine life, it's not the insulin like growth factor that maintains the length of the baby, but it's insulin like growth factor 2, okay, which has nothing to do with growth hormone. Okay, so there will be normal length of the baby, but afterwards, after the birth, then the person is not going to, the bones are not going to grow, so there will be decrease and there will be dwarfism. Okay, now let us try to understand some disorders related to growth hormone. So, a very much important disorder is because of increased growth hormone secretion. Okay, very much important disorder. I'm talking actually about acromegaly, but in some cases, this increase in see, whenever there is increased growth hormone secretion, almost 90% of the times, this increased growth hormone secretion is because of a growth hormone secreting tumor in the anterior pituitary. Okay, let me go back to this diagram. In this type. Okay, let us say here is a tumor of the anterior pituitary gland. This is a tumor of anterior pituitary gland, and from this tumor, the cells it's a functional tumor, so cells produce excess quantities of growth hormone. And these increased levels of growth hormone, they are responsible for manifestations. And so, if this tumor increased levels of growth hormone, that's this tumor, if it's present in an individual more than 20 years of age, then there will be one condition. If it is present in an individual less than 20 years of age, then there will be another condition. Now, why so? Because the reason is simple, because before 20 years of age, the person is in the growth phase, adolescent phase, so there will be epiphyseal plates will not be closed yet. So there will be this increased epiphyseal growth. Once epiphyseal plates are closed, then they cannot grow, so there will be more epiphyseal growth, and as a result, the person is going to become the length of the person, height of the person is going to increase, so it's called as gigantism. It's called as gigantism. But after 20 years of age, the epiphyseal plates will be closed, so the height of the person cannot increase, but the acral parts are what we call as the peripheral parts. Okay, acral parts are the peripheral parts can grow. They can grow. They can increase in thickness. They can increase in breadth, and this condition is called as acromegaly, which is actually a very important disorder related to growth hormone. It's called as acromegaly. So, in less than 20 years of age, gigantism. More than 20 years of age, acromegaly. Okay, because it affects only acral parts. Now, let us try to understand the acromegaly. So, as we saw, acromegaly, most commonly it occurs because of a growth hormone secreting tumor in the pituitary. Growth hormone secreting tumor in pituitary. Okay, it's called as adenoma, growth hormone secreting adenoma, right? Now, it's commonly seen in males as compared to females. So these are some basic points, and the manifestations will be because of increased growth hormone. Now here again, what will be the now there will be increased production of growth hormone from this tumor, but again, like I said, there will be what's called as Stark effect. So I'll try to explain it here. If this is the pituitary gland, okay, if this pituitary gland, and here is growth hormone secreting tumor. Now this growth hormone secreting tumor can actually grow, and it can cause compression of stalk. So the factors from the hypothalamus, they cannot reach into the pituitary, okay, because of this compression. So there will be what's called as stalk effect as well. Stalk effect. So there will be increased growth hormone, and this growth hormone will be produced from the tumor. Okay, there will be increased prolactin, decrease in other hormones, decrease in FSH, LH, decrease in ACTH, and this will be because of Stark effect. This will be because of Stark effect. Okay. Now let's try to understand some clinical features related to acromegaly. So what are facial features? In facial features, there will be prominent supraorbital ridges. Supraorbital ridges. There will be frontal bossing. So this will be because of growth of these bones, increase in width, increase in thickness of these bones. Frontal bossing, there will be macroglossia. So the length, so the size of tongue is going to increase, will be macroglossia. There is going to be prognathism. That means the chin of the person is going, there will be prominent chin. It's going to increase in size, and there will be large lips, etc. So practically all the soft organs of the body, they grow, and so all the soft organs, they grow in size, except, so there are exceptions, except first is the brain, and other is gonads, because gonad, they are more responsible to gonadotropins, and brain, it grows independent of the growth hormone. So these are some factors. Now what about nerves? Okay, now this growth hormone, it can cause increase in thickness of bones around the wrist, which can actually cause compression of median nerve, compression of median nerve, which can result in carpal tunnel syndrome. Okay, carpal tunnel syndrome. In cardiovascular system, because it causes increases, it causes growth of soft organs, so it can cause left ventricular hypertrophy, asymmetric left ventricular hypertrophy, which can eventually result in what's called as diastolic failure. In the respiratory system, again, it can actually cause growth of, it can cause growth, yeah, proliferation of soft tissues and glands in airways. This can cause a manifestation which is called as obstructive sleep apnea. And obstructive sleep apnea in the long run will cause pulmonary hypertension. Okay, just remember this, it will cause pulmonary hypertension. In the joints, there will be because of involvement of synovium of the joints, it can cause arthritis like manifestation. Arthritis like manifestations. Now in the reproductive system, the effect on reproductive system will be actually because of the Stark effect. Okay, it will be because of Stark effect, because there will be decreased production of FSH and LH. So as a result, in the reproductive system, there will be decreased FSH, there will be decreased LH, and which in males, it can cause what's called as infertility It can decrease libido, and in females, it can cause oligomenoria. It can cause decreased fertility. So these are main manifestations which are associated with acromegaly. And here's a diagram as well. As you can see, the person has frontal bossing, so chin is prominent. That's called as prognathism. There is these the lips, they are relatively somewhat larger in size. So all the facial features are more prominent in this diagram, as you can see. Plus, there will be growth of hands and growth of feet as well. I forgot to mention here there will be increase in size of hands and feet. So these are all manifestations which are related to acromegaly. So acromegaly is a very important topic, and for the treatment of acromegaly, we have to resect the tumor. So we approach it posteriorly. So transsphenoidal resection is the treatment of choice in this case. Now, there are some other conditions in which the person actually does not have acromegaly, but the appearance suggests that the person might have acromegaly. So it's similar to acromegaly, but it's not acromegaly. This is called as pseudo-acromegaly. Pseudo-acromegaly. It occurs in conditions like it can occur in obesity, it can occur in hypothyroidism, it can occur because of phenytoin therapy, it can occur because of phenytoin therapy, obesity, hypothyroidism because of phenytoin therapy, and there are some other factors as well. I don't know right now. So this is all about the anterior pituitary gland. So we discussed the first hormone called as growth hormone. Now in the coming section we'll discuss prolactin and then other hormones as well. Okay, so that's all about today's lecture. Thank you.